Joanna F. Torres closed the distance between herself and the stranger before doubt could stop her. Before we begin, thank you for being here. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy stories like this. His lips met hers in the darkness of the penthouse, gentle but certain, and for those suspended seconds the glittering city below ceased to exist. When she pulled back, his dark eyes held hers with quiet intensity. He seemed like someone with nothing, no power, no influence. Just a man, alone in an empty building after hours. She had no idea she'd just kissed the most dangerous man in the city. 30 minutes earlier, Joanna had been sitting alone at Marcello's, waiting for a colleague who'd just canceled. Her promotion to senior analyst at Sterling Financial had finally come through after 3 years of proving herself. Tonight was supposed to mark her arrival. Independence earned, not given. Then chaos erupted. A striking woman in pearls swept through the entrance, flanked by security. "Where is my son?" she demanded. Her gaze landed on Joanna. There she is. Charles's intended. The future bride of the Kim family. Joanna's face burned. "I think you have the wrong." "Nonsense. Charles told me all about you. Come, dear. He's waiting upstairs." The entire restaurant had gone silent at the name. Charles Kim. It meant nothing to Joanna, yet everyone else seemed to hold their breath. Pride made her stand. Curiosity made her follow. The elevator deposited her in a sprawling penthouse of glass and shadow. Then she saw him, a figure by the windows, hands in his pockets, wearing a simple white shirt with rolled sleeves. His dark hair caught the ambient light. When he turned, she expected arrogance. Instead, his expression held loneliness. "I'm sorry about my mother," he said quietly. "You don't have to stay." But something about the way he stood there, powerful yet utterly alone, kept her rooted. "She called you Charles?" Joanna ventured. "Charles P. Kim. Though that name carries more weight than it should." They stood in darkness together, two strangers connected by absurdity. That's when Joanna made her choice. Perhaps it was the loneliness she recognized in his eyes, or her own need to feel less invisible. She crossed the space between them and kissed him. And Charles P. Kim, the man she believed had nothing but an overbearing mother, kissed her back with restraint that felt like barely controlled hunger. What Joanna couldn't know was that Charles P. Kim didn't just carry weight in his name. He was the weight. And the moment their lips met, she'd stepped into a world where power didn't announce itself. It simply closed around you until escape was no longer an option. SI equals QZDRKHDX rho WT la 0. The kiss ended, but Joanna didn't step back. Charles's hands remained at her waist, his touch careful, as though she might disappear if he moved too quickly. The city lights beyond the glass cast shadows across his face, and she studied him in the half-darkness, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I should go," she whispered, though she made no move toward the elevator. "You should," he agreed. But his hands didn't release her. The silence stretched between them, charged with something Joanna couldn't name. She'd never done anything like this before, kissed a stranger, lingered in a penthouse that wasn't hers. Her entire life had been built on careful choices, measured risks, strategic moves that guaranteed safety. This felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. "Your mother," Joanna finally said. "She really thought I was my intended bride." A slight smile touched his lips. "She has a tendency to interfere. Tonight was just her latest attempt." "Does she do this often?" "Announce random women as your future wife. You'd be the third this month." Joanna laughed despite herself, and something in Charles's expression softened. He stepped back, giving her space, and moved to a small bar cart near the windows. "Would you like a drink?" She should have refused. Should have left this strange, suspended moment behind. Instead, she found herself saying, "Whiskey." "Neat." His eyebrows lifted slightly, surprise, maybe approval, and he poured 2 glasses. When he handed her one, their fingers brushed. The contact sent electricity up her arm. "So," Joanna said. "Charles P. Kim. What does the P stand for?" "Patrick." He settled into a leather chair near the window, gesturing for her to take the one opposite. "Family name?" "Irish mother, Korean father." And what do you do, Charles Patrick Kim? Besides live in penthouses and have an overbearing mother? For a moment something flickered across his face. Caution, calculation, a shadow that disappeared as quickly as it came. Investments, he said smoothly. Boring corporate things. Nothing worth discussing. But Joanna had spent 3 years analyzing people in boardrooms, reading the micro-expressions that betrayed truth from fiction. Charles wasn't lying exactly, but he wasn't telling the whole truth either. And you? He asked, redirecting. What does Joanna F. Torres do when she's not being kidnapped by strangers' mothers? Financial analysis. Sterling Financial. She sipped her whiskey, letting it burn down her throat. The F is for Faith. My grandmother's name. Faith, he repeated, and the way he said it, soft, almost reverent, made her chest tighten. That's a dangerous thing to have. Is it? His dark eyes met hers across the dim space. In my experience, yes. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, 2 strangers sat in darkness, drinking whiskey and pretending they were ordinary people having an ordinary conversation. But Joanna could feel it, the weight of something unspoken, the sense that this moment would change everything. She just didn't know how much. Joanna didn't mean to stay until midnight, but conversations with Charles had a way of unraveling time. They'd moved from whiskey to wine, from the stiff formality of chairs to the more relaxed territory of the floor-to-ceiling windows, sitting with their backs against the glass as the city glowed beneath them. He was careful with his words, she noticed. Every answer slightly evasive, every personal detail measured and controlled. But his questions were genuine. He asked about her work, her ambitions, the dissertation she'd abandoned in grad school. He listened like her words mattered. It was nearly 1 a.m. when her phone buzzed. A text from her boss. Meeting moved to 8 a.m. Be prepared to present the Castellano account. Problem? Charles asked, catching her expression. Early meeting. Joanna stood, smoothing her dress. I should get home. Get some sleep. I'll have my driver take you. That's not necessary. It's 1 a.m, Joanna. Please. Something in his tone made argument impossible. 5 minutes later, she was in the back of a black Mercedes, the driver appearing as if summoned by thought alone. The car was immaculate, leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The driver knew her address without asking. Joanna froze, staring at the back of his head. I didn't tell you where I live. Mr. Kim provided the information, ma'am. His voice was professional, neutral. Her pulse quickened. She'd never told Charles her address. Never even mentioned her neighborhood. Yet somehow he knew. The drive passed in uneasy silence. When they pulled up to her building, the driver opened her door with precise efficiency. Have a good evening, Miss Torres. He knew her last name too. The next morning, Joanna arrived at Sterling Financial to find chaos. The Castellano account, the presentation she'd spent 3 weeks preparing, had been reassigned to Marcus Webb, a senior partner's nephew who'd joined the firm 6 months ago. I don't understand, Joanna said to her boss, Janet. You texted me last night about presenting? Plans changed. Janet wouldn't meet her eyes. Marcus has connections with the client. It makes more sense for him to handle it. Connections? I've been building rapport with Castellano for months. The decision's been made, Joanna. I'm sorry. She wasn't sorry. She was scared. Joanna spent the rest of the day in a fog, trying to understand what had just happened. At lunch, she overheard 2 colleagues whispering near the break room. Heard the Castellano family personally requested the change. Since when do clients dictate our internal assignments? Since they donate millions to the firm's foundation. Since they have the kind of connections that can sink careers. Joanna's blood ran cold. Castellano. She'd heard that name before, whispered in certain circles. Old money with roots in less legitimate ventures. That evening her phone rang. Unknown number. Joanna. Charles's voice was warm, familiar. I was hoping we could have dinner tomorrow night. She stared at her phone, pieces clicking into place she didn't want to see. The driver knowing her address. The sudden reassignment. The whispered warnings about connections. How do you know the Castellanos? She asked quietly. Pause. Too long. Dinner tomorrow, he said. I'll explain everything. Joanna almost didn't go to dinner. She'd spent the entire day convincing herself that Charles P. Kim was just another wealthy man with too many connections and too much influence. That the driver knowing her address was a coincidence. That the Castellano situation was unrelated. But deep down she knew better. The restaurant he'd chosen was quiet, exclusive. The kind of place that didn't advertise and didn't need to. When Joanna arrived, the maitre d' greeted her by name and led her to a private corner table where Charles already sat, looking unfairly elegant in a dark suit. He stood when he saw her, and for a moment his expression was unguarded. Relief, maybe concern. Then the careful mask returned. You came, he said simply. I almost didn't. Joanna sat, accepting the wine the sommelier poured without asking her preference. I want answers, Charles. Real ones. I know. He dismissed the staff with a subtle gesture, and suddenly they were alone in the corner, the ambient noise of the restaurant fading to background static. What do you want to know? Let's start with how your driver knew my address. Charles's jaw tightened. I had someone look into you. After my mother's performance at Marcello's, I wanted to make sure you got home safely. Look into me, Joanna repeated, the words bitter on her tongue. You mean investigate me? Yes. The honesty was startling. No excuses, no deflection. Just the plain, damning truth. And the Castellano account? She pressed. The presentation that was taken from me the morning after I met you. Was that you too? Something flickered across his face, regret, guilt, something darker. The Castellanos are business associates. When I mentioned I'd met someone from Sterling Financial, they made certain arrangements. Arrangements. Joanna's hands clenched in her lap. You had my work stolen from me? No. His voice was sharp, urgent. I didn't know they'd do that. I mentioned your name in passing and they... He stopped, seeming to choose his words carefully. They interpreted it as interest. Made moves to protect that interest. Protect. The word tasted like ash. They sabotaged my career to protect your interest in me? Joanna. Who are you? She leaned forward, holding his gaze. And don't tell me you're in investments. Don't give me another carefully constructed lie. Who are you really? The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Around them, the restaurant continued its elegant dance. Servers moving with practiced grace, the clink of crystal, muted laughter from distant tables. But in their corner, the world had narrowed to this moment, this question. Finally, Charles spoke, his voice low and tired. I'm someone who was born into a world I didn't choose. Someone whose name carries weight I never asked for. And I'm someone who, for the first time in a very long time, met a woman who looked at me like I was ordinary. But you're not ordinary. No, he admitted. I'm not. Joanna stood, her chair scraping softly against the floor. Then we have nothing more to discuss. She was halfway to the exit when his voice stopped her. My family controls this city, Joanna. Not through elections or public office. Through quieter means. Joanna didn't turn around. Charles's words hung in the air between them. My family controls this city, and every instinct screamed at her to leave. To run. To forget she'd ever kissed a stranger in a darkened penthouse. But her feet wouldn't move. What does that mean? She asked quietly, still facing the exit. It means you should sit back down. Please. She turned slowly. Charles remained at the table, his expression unreadable, but something in his posture spoke of exhaustion. Of a man tired of carrying secrets. Joanna returned to her seat. The Kim family, Charles began, his voice barely above a whisper, has interests in shipping, real estate, financial services. Legitimate businesses built on foundations that weren't always legitimate. My grandfather made choices during the war years that positioned us, strategically. Strategically, Joanna repeated. You mean illegally? I mean survival. And yes, illegally. He met her eyes. I inherited an empire I didn't build, with connections I didn't forge. But I'm still responsible for it. The Castellanos are one of many families we're affiliated with. When I mentioned your name, they assumed I was claiming you. Marking territory. His hands clenched on the table. It's how they think. How they operate. Joanna's stomach turned. I'm not territory to be claimed. I know. That's why I'm telling you this. That's why I need you to understand what you've walked into. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Leave now. You don't know what he is. She stared at the screen, ice flooding her veins. What is it? Charles asked, leaning forward. Another text. Ask him about the Harrison development deal. Ask him what happened to the city councilman who opposed it. Joanna's hands trembled. Someone's texting me. Warning me about you. Charles's expression darkened. He pulled out his own phone, typed something rapidly. Within seconds, 2 men in dark suits appeared at the restaurant's entrance, scanning the room with professional efficiency. Security, Charles said simply. Someone's watching us. Your security or theirs? My. But the person texting you? He paused. Show me. She held out her phone. Charles read the messages, his jaw tightening with each word. The Harrison development deal was legitimate, he said finally. And Councilman Morrison retired to Florida. He's alive and well. But there were people who wanted him gone. People who thought I should have made that happen. His eyes met hers, dark and intense. I didn't. That's not how I operate. But not everyone believes that. A third text arrived. He's lying. They all lie. Get out while you still can. Joanna stood again, her heart pounding. I need to go. Not alone. Not with someone tracking your phone. I don't need your protection. Yes, you do. Charles's voice was flat, certain. The moment my mother announced you at Marcello's, the moment I had my driver take you home, you became visible. And visible people in my world become targets. Then maybe, Joanna said, her voice shaking, you should have left me alone. His expression cracked, showing raw pain beneath. Maybe I should have. Charles's security escorted Joanna home despite her protests. They swept her apartment, checked her windows, installed new locks she didn't ask for. When they finally left, she sat in the darkness of her living room, staring at her phone and the messages from the unknown number. No new texts. Just silence, which somehow felt worse. She didn't sleep. At 3 a.m, she opened her laptop and typed, Charles P. Kim. The search results were carefully curated. Business profiles, charity galas, society page photographs. Charles in tailored suits, shaking hands with politicians and CEOs. Charles at museum openings, art auctions, foundation dinners. He looked the part of a legitimate businessman, polished and untouchable. But Joanna had learned to read between lines in financial reports. She knew how to follow money through shell corporations and offshore accounts. So she dug deeper. The Kim family empire was vast. Shipping operations throughout Asia, commercial real estate in every major American city, venture capital investments in dozens of startups. On paper, everything appeared legitimate. But the patterns were there for anyone who knew how to look. Properties acquired just before zoning changes. Shipping contracts awarded after competitors mysteriously withdrew bids. Business partners who disappeared from public records after disputes. Nothing provable. Nothing prosecutable. Just a trail of convenient coincidences stretching back 3 generations. At dawn, her doorbell rang. Joanna checked the peephole to find a woman in her 60s, elegantly dressed, holding a leather portfolio. Miss Torres? The woman's voice was crisp, professional. My name is Margaret Chin. I'm an attorney. May I come in? Every instinct told Joanna to refuse. She opened the door anyway. Margaret settled on the couch with practiced ease, opening her portfolio. I represent certain interests in this city. Interests concerned about your recent association with Charles P. Kim. I don't have an association with him. You kissed him 3 nights ago in his penthouse. His security has been monitoring your apartment since yesterday. He had the Castellanos intervene in your career. Margaret's smile was cold. That constitutes an association. Joanna's mouth went dry. What do you want? To give you information Mr. Kim won't. She placed a photograph on the coffee table. Do you recognize this man? The photo showed a middle-aged man in a business suit, smiling at a restaurant. No. David Porter. He was an investigative journalist who spent 5 years researching the Kim family. 3 years ago, he published an exposé detailing their connections to organized crime, money laundering, and political corruption. Another photograph. 2 weeks after publication, he died in a car accident. Joanna stared at the images, her stomach churning. The police ruled it accidental, Margaret continued. But witnesses reported another vehicle forcing Porter off the road. That vehicle was registered to a company owned by a Kim subsidiary. You're saying Charles? I'm saying Charles P. Kim is not a businessman who inherited questionable connections. He's the operational head of a criminal organization that's been laundering money and buying influence for decades. And now, Margaret's gaze was sharp, assessing. You're entangled with him. I'm not entangled with anyone. Tell yourself that, Margaret said, standing. But when you're ready to hear the full truth, call me. She left a business card on the table and walked out. Joanna called in sick to work. She couldn't face the office, couldn't pretend everything was normal when her world had fractured into dangerous pieces. She spent the morning staring at Margaret Chen's business card, running searches on David Porter's death, finding breadcrumbs of truth buried beneath official narratives. The car accident had indeed been ruled accidental. But forum posts and archive blog comments told a different story. Witnesses who'd seen another vehicle, police reports that disappeared, an investigation that closed suspiciously fast. Her phone rang at noon. Charles. She let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. By the 5th call she answered. Stop calling me. Joanna, listen. His voice was urgent, strained. Someone's using you. The messages, the lawyer who visited you this morning. How do you know about that? Pause. My security is monitoring your apartment. Get them out. Her voice shook with fury. You have no right. You're in danger. Real danger. And not from me. He exhaled sharply. Margaret Chen works for the Castellanos. They're testing you, trying to turn you against me. Maybe they're trying to save me. By feeding you half-truths? By using a dead journalist as a weapon. His laugh was bitter. David Porter's death was a tragedy. But I didn't order it. I didn't even know about it until after. How convenient. Joanna. She hung up. 2 hours later, she was leaving her building to buy groceries when a black SUV pulled up to the curb. Not Charles's Mercedes. Something darker, more aggressive. 2 men in suits emerged. One was tall and broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his left cheek. The other was leaner, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Miss Torres, the scarred man said. Mr. Castellano would like a word. Her heart hammered against her ribs. I don't know any Mr. Castellano. But he knows you. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. And he's very interested in your relationship with Charles Kim. I don't have a relationship with him. That's not what we've observed. He gestured toward the SUV. Please. This will be easier if you cooperate. Joanna's hand moved toward her phone. The lean man was faster, plucking it from her grasp with casual efficiency. No calls, he said pleasantly. No witnesses. Fear turned her blood to ice. She was on a busy street in broad daylight, and these men were calmly kidnapping her as pedestrians walked past, oblivious. If I scream? You won't, the scarred man said. Because we know where your sister lives. Emily, isn't it? Sweet girl. Works at the Children's Hospital in Boston. The world tilted. Don't you dare. Then get in the car. She got in the car. They drove for 20 minutes, leaving the city proper and heading toward the warehouse district. Joanna's mind raced through possibilities, escape routes, weapons, people who might notice her missing. But her phone was gone, Charles's security was outside her apartment, and no one knew where she was. The SUV pulled into an abandoned loading dock. Through the tinted windows, Joanna could see more men waiting. And she understood, finally, what Charles had tried to warn her about. In his world, people didn't just fall in love. They became leverage. The warehouse was cold, stripped bare except for metal chairs and harsh fluorescent lights. Joanna sat in the center of the space, hands zip-tied behind her back, while men in expensive suits watched from the shadows. Then Vincent Castellano emerged. He was older than she'd expected, perhaps 70, with silver hair and a face carved by decades of calculated cruelty. His suit was impeccable, his movements deliberate as he circled her chair. "Miss Torres," he said pleasantly. "Thank you for joining us. I didn't have a choice. None of us do really. We all answer to something." He stopped in front of her. "You've become quite important to Charles Kim. That makes you important to me. I barely know him. And yet his security follows you. His associates rearrange your career. He calls you repeatedly." Vincent smiled. "In our world, Miss Torres, such attention means ownership. Charles has claimed you whether you understand it or not." Joanna's pulse hammered. "What do you want?" "Information. Charles has been resistant to certain business propositions. We believe your influence might change his mind." "I have no influence over him." "Then you're useless to us." Vincent's tone remained pleasant, which somehow made it worse. "And useless things get discarded." Before Joanna could respond, the warehouse door exploded inward. Charles strode through the wreckage, flanked by a dozen men carrying weapons that made Vincent's security suddenly look inadequate. His expression was cold fury incarnate, and when his eyes found Joanna, something dangerous flickered across his face. "Let her go," Charles said quietly. Vincent didn't move. "Or what? You'll start a war over one woman?" "Yes." The single word carried absolute certainty. The warehouse went silent, tension coiling like a live wire ready to snap. "You're bluffing," Vincent said, but doubt crept into his voice. "Try me." Charles took a step forward. "You took something that belongs to me. I want it back. Now." "She doesn't belong to you," Joanna shouted, finding her voice. "I'm not a possession to be traded between criminals." Charles's gaze shifted to her, and for a moment the cold mask cracked. Pain, guilt, something raw and honest showed through. "You're right," he said. "You don't belong to me. You don't belong to anyone." He turned back to Vincent. "Which is why I'm asking. Please, let her go." The word please hung in the air like a foreign object. Men like Charles Kim didn't beg, didn't show weakness, didn't surrender control. Vincent studied him, calculating. "And the Hong Kong shipment you've been blocking? I'll reconsider. The waterfront property? We can negotiate. Your support for the mayoral candidate?" Charles's jaw clenched. "Withdrawn." Joanna watched in horror as Charles dismantled his own power, piece by piece, trading everything he'd built for her freedom. This was what control looked like when it finally broke. Not dramatic, not violent, just a man making impossible choices because the alternative was unthinkable. Vincent gestured, and one of his men cut Joanna's zip ties. She stood on shaking legs, crossing to Charles. When she reached him, she didn't take his offered hand. "You just gave them everything," she whispered. "No," Charles said, his eyes holding hers. "I gave them nothing that mattered." Then he turned and walked out, leaving her to choose whether to follow. Joanna followed him. Not because she trusted him, but because staying in that warehouse felt like accepting Vincent Castellano's version of reality, one where she was a pawn, leverage, something to be bargained over. Charles's car waited outside, engine running. He held the door open for her, and she slid inside without a word. The drive back to the city was silent, tension thick enough to choke on. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "Wherever you want. I want answers. Real ones this time." Charles nodded, changing direction. 20 minutes later they pulled up to a nondescript office building. He led her to the top floor, unlocking a door to reveal a spacious apartment, lived in with books on shelves and coffee cups in the sink. Not a showpiece like the penthouse. A home. "This is where I actually live," he said quietly. "Not the penthouse. That's for show, for meetings, for the version of myself everyone expects." Joanna walked to the window, arms crossed. "You just gave Vincent Castellano everything he wanted. I gave him concessions. Temporary wins." Charles poured 2 glasses of whiskey, setting one on the table near her. "But I kept what matters." "And what matters to you, Charles? Control? Power? Your empire?" "You." The word landed like a physical blow. Joanna turned to face him. "You don't even know me," she said. "I know you're brilliant, that you take your coffee black and read financial reports like novels, that you've built a career through intelligence and determination, not connections." His voice was rough, honest. "I know that when you kissed me you weren't kissing Charles P. Kim, heir to a criminal empire. You were kissing someone you thought was ordinary. And for the first time in my life I felt like I could be. But you're not ordinary. You never will be. No." He stepped closer. "But I can choose to be different. I can choose to dismantle what my grandfather built, piece by piece. Legitimize the businesses, cut ties with families like the Castellanos, build something clean. That's not possible. You said yourself, these connections run too deep. It's not possible alone." His eyes held hers. "But with the right incentive I'd burn it all down." Joanna's breath caught. "Don't put that on me. Don't make me responsible for your choices." "I'm not. I'm making myself responsible." He pulled out his phone, showed her a document. "This is a letter to the district attorney. Everything, shell corporations, money laundering operations, political bribes. Names, dates, account numbers. Enough to dismantle 3 criminal organizations including my own." Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the pages. "This would destroy you." "Yes. You'd go to prison." "Probably." "Then why?" "Because you were right." His voice cracked. "In that warehouse watching Vincent threaten you I realized something. Power isn't control. It's a cage. And I've been locked inside it my entire life, pretending I had a choice." Joanna set down the phone, her mind reeling. "What are you asking me?" "Nothing. I'm telling you I'm done. Whether you walk away or stay, I'm dismantling this empire. But if you stay," he paused, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen, "I'd like the chance to be the man you kissed that night. The one with nothing to lose." Joanna didn't answer immediately. She walked to the window, staring at the city that Charles claimed his family controlled. From up here it looked peaceful, innocent, just lights and movement, millions of people living ordinary lives. "If you send that letter," she said quietly, "what happens to the people who work for you? The legitimate employees, the ones who have nothing to do with the criminal side." Charles moved beside her, maintaining careful distance. "I've set up severance packages, references, job placements with companies that have no Kim family connections. It's all in the documents." "And your mother?" A muscle in his jaw tightened. "She'll be furious. She'll say I'm destroying my grandfather's legacy." He exhaled slowly. "But she'll be safe. I've made sure of that. You've thought of everything. I've had 3 sleepless nights to plan." He turned to face her. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this to win you. I'm doing it because you showed me what freedom looks like, choosing to kiss someone not because they're powerful or useful but because you wanted to. That kind of choice, that simplicity, I want that for myself." Joanna's eyes burned with unexpected tears. "I was terrified in that warehouse." "I know. I'm sorry. Your world almost destroyed me and we barely know each other." "I know. And you're asking me to stay? To watch you dismantle everything, go to prison, rebuild from nothing?" "No." Charles's voice was gentle. "I'm asking you to live your life. Get your promotion back, build your career, be brilliant and ambitious and free. And when I've cleaned up this mess, when I've served whatever sentence comes." He paused, vulnerability raw in his expression. "Maybe then I could take you to dinner. As equals. As 2 people with nothing but possibility between them." Joanna wiped her eyes, laughing despite everything. "That's the most arrogant, humble request I've ever heard. Old habits." A slight smile touched his lips. "But I mean it. You deserve someone without handcuffs, literal or metaphorical." She studied him for a long moment, seeing past the carefully constructed facade to the man beneath. Someone who'd been born into darkness but was choosing light, even knowing the cost. 6 months, she said finally. "What?" "I'll wait 6 months. You send that letter, cooperate with authorities, start serving whatever time they give you." She stepped closer. "And I'll visit. Once a month. We'll talk, really talk like we did that first night." No lies, no secrets, no power games. Joanna. And if, after 6 months, you're still the man I kissed in that penthouse, the one who looked at me like I mattered more than empires, then we'll see. Hope flickered across his face, fragile and precious. That's not much of a promise. It's more than you deserve. I know. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her face with devastating gentleness. Thank you. She kissed him then, soft and certain. Not the desperate kiss of strangers in darkness, but something deeper. A promise made not with words but with choice, the only thing that mattered when power finally surrendered. Outside, the city glowed on, indifferent to the empire about to crumble. Inside, two people stood together, holding on to possibility. And for the first time in Charles P. Kim's carefully controlled life, the future was beautifully, terrifyingly uncertain. Thank you for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more.